In a single, unforgettable night, more than 31,000 buildings throughout Israel were shattered or reduced to rubble. The skyline over both Tel Aviv and Jerusalem pulsed with fire as wave after wave of Iranian missiles and drones descended, tearing apart the illusion of impenetrable security. The world watched in disbelief as news outlets showed live images of flames licking the glass towers of Israel's major cities, and sirens blaring through neighborhoods that once felt untouchable. This was not only a night of extraordinary military confrontation, it was an economic earthquake, with tremors felt from Wall Street to Shanghai. It raised a fundamental question. What happens when the Middle East's business capital is suddenly exposed as vulnerable? And in this new age of smart weapons, cyber warfare, and economic interdependence, who ultimately bears the cost when nations go to war? To truly understand how we reached this boiling point, we must travel back through decades of simmering tensions, shifting alliances, and bitter enmity. The roots of the Iran-Israel rivalry stretch far deeper than the surface-level headlines. Before the Iranian Revolution of 1979, Iran and Israel, despite religious differences, maintained a pragmatic, if secretive, relationship. Iran's monarchy, the Pahlavi dynasty, saw Israel as a potential partner in a hostile region. Trade flourished, intelligence was shared, and there was even talk of strategic cooperation. All of that changed overnight with the Iranian Revolution. Iran's new Islamic Republic, led by Ayatollah Khomeini, declared Israel an enemy, branding it the Little Satan, in contrast to the United States' Great Satan. Diplomatic ties were severed, embassies closed, and a campaign of ideological opposition began. Over the following decades, Iran poured resources into supporting militant groups such as Hezbollah in Lebanon and Hamas in Gaza. These groups became Iran's instruments of influence, launching attacks against Israeli targets and drawing Israel into costly wars in Lebanon and repeated cycles of conflict in Gaza. Israel, for its part, responded with a combination of overt and covert tactics. From precision airstrikes on suspected Iranian weapons convoys in Syria to daring sabotage missions against Iran's nuclear facilities, Israel developed a reputation for technological prowess and operational daring. The so-called shadow war played out across the Middle East and beyond, sometimes in the skies above Damascus, sometimes in the digital corridors of Tehran's energy grid. Meanwhile, the United States, Israel's closest ally, injected tens of billions of dollars into Israeli defense, while also leading international campaigns to sanction and pressure Iran. American warships patrolled the Persian Gulf, and diplomats shuffled endlessly between capitals, trying to contain the risk of catastrophic regional war. According to Chuck Freilich, a senior fellow at Israel's Institute for National Security Studies, this conflict is about far more than ideology or religion. Both Iran and Israel are vying for regional dominance, for control over resources, influence, and the future direction of the Middle East. Every confrontation raises the stakes, and every escalation brings new, unpredictable consequences. In recent years, this decades-old rivalry has evolved, becoming increasingly complex and dangerous. It has spilled beyond the battlefield into the worlds of finance, technology, and everyday life. Both sides have launched sophisticated cyber attacks, sometimes targeting power plants, sometimes hospitals, sometimes even civilian infrastructure such as water supplies and public transportation. Iranian-backed hackers have infiltrated Israeli banks and power grids. Israeli malware has reportedly disrupted Iranian centrifuges, delaying its nuclear ambitions. Economic sanctions by Western nations have crippled Iran's oil exports, while Iran has retaliated by targeting shipping lanes and energy infrastructure across the region. Fast forward to the present year, and the slow burn of this conflict finally erupted into something the world had never seen before. After a series of Israeli operations targeting Iranian interests, including suspected hits on nuclear research sites and high-ranking military commanders, Iran decided to respond directly. In a span of just a few hours, Iran unleashed a barrage that overwhelmed even Israel's legendary Iron Dome missile defense. While Israeli air defenses managed to intercept approximately 9 out of every 10 incoming rockets, the sheer volume of projectiles meant that hundreds still broke through. Cities from Haifa in the north to Beersheba in the south saw buildings collapse, roads buckle, and entire neighborhoods plunged into darkness. The damage was immense and immediate. The Beersheba Hospital, a critical healthcare hub in Israel's south, was so badly hit that intensive care patients had to be evacuated in the dead of night, carried on stretchers and wheelchairs to hastily prepared emergency wards. Schools and kindergartens in Tel Aviv, ordinarily bustling with children, were closed indefinitely. The Ben Gurion Airport, Israel's primary gateway to the world, was shut down for the first time in decades. International flights were canceled or rerouted, leaving thousands of travelers stranded and global commerce grinding to a temporary halt. The economic toll is staggering by any measure. The Israeli military's early assessments placed the cost of property and infrastructure damage at over $3 billion, a figure that is likely to grow as the full extent of the devastation comes into focus. Insurance companies are bracing for payouts that could easily exceed $1 billion, with the bulk of claims coming from homeowners, vehicle owners, and businesses whose assets were obliterated overnight. The Israeli government, facing mounting public pressure, rushed to approve an emergency reconstruction fund of $500 million, aimed at restoring basic services and helping families rebuild their lives. The shockwaves rippled far beyond Israel's borders. Stock markets in Tel Aviv, New York, and London experienced sharp declines as investors scrambled to assess the risk of further escalation. Housing prices in Tel Aviv, a city famous for its sky-high real estate, dipped almost overnight, as residents and potential buyers questioned the wisdom of investing in a city now proven vulnerable to mass destruction. Major tech firms, long considered the backbone of Israel's startup nation economy, faced immediate disruptions. Several multinational corporations announced the temporary relocation of their regional headquarters, citing security risks and the need to protect their employees. And as if the physical destruction was not enough, a parallel war raged in the digital realm. Iranian-backed hackers launched coordinated cyber attacks against Israel's critical infrastructure, targeting everything from water treatment plants to financial institutions. The Israeli National Cyber Directorate reported that in the days following the missile strikes, attempted intrusions increased tenfold. Websites were defaced, personal data was leaked, and online banking services were intermittently disrupted. For ordinary Israelis, the sense of vulnerability was not just physical, but psychological and digital as well. Seema Shine, the former deputy director of Mossad, summed it up succinctly. The real danger is the psychological impact. When people lose faith in their country's ability to protect them, whether from missiles or malware, investors and businesses begin to wonder, can Israel still guarantee stability? This all unfolded against a backdrop of international outrage and frantic political maneuvering. The United Nations demanded an independent investigation into the proportionality of Iran's response, with some member states accusing both sides of escalating the conflict. The United States Congress quickly passed a resolution condemning the Iranian strikes, while reaffirming America's unwavering support for Israel's right to self-defense. European leaders called emergency summits to discuss the potential spillover into neighboring countries, as oil prices surged and fears of a broader regional war mounted. Yet, as diplomats called for calm, the true struggle began not on the battlefield, but in the world's boardrooms, trading floors, and innovation hubs. The attack raised uncomfortable questions. If Israel, with its world-renowned cyber defenses and deep international partnerships, could be brought to its knees by a single night's assault, what did that mean for the future of economic opportunity in the Middle East? And as cyber warfare becomes ever more entangled with physical attacks, are we entering an era where any nation's prosperity can be erased in a matter of hours? The implications are profound. Israel has long marketed itself as a safe haven for investment, a beacon of stability in a turbulent region. Its technology sector is legendary, producing more startups per capita than almost any other country on Earth. Global giants such as Google, Microsoft, and Intel have poured billions into Israeli research centers, drawn by the country's talent pool and entrepreneurial spirit. But the events of this year shattered the myth of invulnerability. Suddenly, foreign investors and venture capitalists found themselves reassessing the balance between opportunity and risk. But the impact goes far beyond structural damage or staggering insurance payouts. The attack has left deep scars on Israel's economy, psyche, and reputation. Local businesses, from mom-and-pop shops to global conglomerates, have suffered massive disruptions. Supply chains have been interrupted, exports delayed, and consumer confidence shaken. The psychological toll, the sense that safety can no longer be taken for granted, is incalculable. The region now stands at a crossroads. Several possible futures are being debated in the corridors of power from Tel Aviv to Tehran, Washington to Brussels. The first scenario is the most alarming. A miscalculation or new provocation could trigger a full-scale war, engulfing both Iran and Israel and potentially drawing in global superpowers. The consequences would be catastrophic: widespread destruction, massive loss of life, and the collapse of regional economies. Vital shipping lanes could be blocked, causing oil prices to skyrocket. Refugee flows could overwhelm neighboring countries, and the global economy could be thrown into recession. A second, more optimistic scenario envisions a diplomatic breakthrough. Perhaps, through determined negotiation, the parties could reach a new nuclear agreement, limiting Iran's nuclear ambitions in exchange for sanctions relief. Such a deal would not only reduce tensions, but could also unlock billions in frozen assets, attract foreign investment, and usher in an unprecedented era of technological cooperation. Imagine Iranian and Israeli scientists collaborating on water technology, renewable energy, or medical research, projects that could transform the region and benefit the whole world. Yet, according to most analysts, the most likely outcome is a tense and uneasy peace, marked by sporadic flare-ups, regular cyber attacks, and ongoing proxy conflicts in Lebanon, Syria, Yemen, and beyond. This managed instability would prolong uncertainty, deter long-term investment, and make meaningful economic recovery a distant prospect. As Sanam Vakil of Chatham House puts it, "We are witnessing a dangerous new phase where the shadow war is replaced by direct attacks. The risks of miscalculation are higher than ever, and the cost of a single mistake could be measured in thousands of lives and billions of dollars." First, the events in Israel serve as a stark reminder. No economy, no matter how advanced or resilient, is immune to sudden shocks. Diversification, robust risk management, and comprehensive emergency preparedness are no longer luxuries. They are necessities for survival. For investors, this means paying close attention to geopolitical risk, not just in the Middle East, but wherever their capital is deployed. Yoel Guzansky of the Institute for National Security Studies notes, "The global supply chain is only as strong as its weakest link. Disruptions in one region can ripple through international markets, affecting everything from energy prices to semiconductor stocks." Policymakers and business leaders must take note. The Israeli experience highlights the pressing need for resilient infrastructure, both physical and digital. The surge in cyber attacks following the missile strikes exposed new vulnerabilities in critical systems. Companies must double down on cybersecurity, redundancy, and disaster recovery planning. This means investing in backup systems, training employees to recognize threats, and developing contingency plans for everything from ransomware attacks to physical destruction of office space. For ordinary citizens, events like these reinforce the importance of community, solidarity, and adaptability in times of crisis. In Israel, neighbors opened their homes to strangers whose apartments were destroyed. Volunteers rushed to donate blood, food, and clothing. Local tech entrepreneurs pivoted their businesses to provide emergency communication tools and disaster response apps. The spirit of innovation, combined with social cohesion, proved to be a lifeline in the darkest hours. The wider world should also take heed. The Israeli-Iranian conflict is a microcosm of 21st century warfare, where lines between military, economic, and technological domains are increasingly blurred. As nations race to develop hypersonic missiles, artificial intelligence-driven cyber weapons, and autonomous drones, the risk of accidental escalation grows exponentially. The lessons learned in Israel will echo far beyond the Middle East, shaping how countries from Europe to Asia, Africa to the Americas think about defense, deterrence, and resilience. So, how will Israel and its neighbors recover and defend their economies and technological assets in the aftermath of this unprecedented assault? The answer lies in a combination of resilience, innovation, and, perhaps most crucially, cooperation. The Israeli government has already approved an emergency reconstruction fund of $500 million, targeting the rapid rebuilding of hospitals, homes, and public infrastructure. There is talk of launching a new wave of tech startups focused on security, energy independence, and disaster recovery. Some are developing more advanced missile defense algorithms, while others are working on blockchain-based insurance solutions that can process claims more efficiently during crises. International organizations, including the United Nations and the World Bank, have offered technical and financial assistance, urging transparency and accountability in the reconstruction process. Diplomatic backchannels are also working overtime. Regional powers such as Egypt, Jordan, and Turkey have quietly offered to mediate, hoping to prevent further escalation. There is speculation that backdoor talks in European capitals could lead to confidence-building measures, such as hotlines between military commanders or joint committees to investigate incidents. while trust remains low, the stakes are simply too high for inaction. As the world absorbs the lessons of the Israeli-Iranian crisis, it is clear that the future will demand new forms of resilience. Companies must rethink their supply chains, governments must invest in civil defense and digital security, and individuals must cultivate flexibility and solidarity. The road ahead will not be easy, but it is far from predetermined. So, if you found this analysis valuable, please subscribe and share your thoughts in the comments. How do you think the region should adapt to this new era of uncertainty? What steps can your own community take to build economic and technological resilience? And what hidden strategies might global tech leaders be using to safeguard their investments in a world where the next crisis could strike at any moment? Stay tuned for our next episode, where we'll uncover the secret strategies that innovators and investors are using to thrive in times of instability. Until then, remember,